Hello, everyone, and welcome to Be Mindful Studios, Be Mindful TV. I'm your host, Brittany. I'm a licensed mental health therapist, and today we are going to be talking about boundaries. In this discussion, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about boundaries not only from a mental health perspective, but we're also going to be exploring boundaries from a theological perspective, viewing the examples and actually examining the language that I'm going to give you. We can determine the boundaries were indeed set in the Bible in biblical time. Before we get started, I do want to make a statement. This is not a substitute for individual counseling. Okay, so this video is for educational purposes, and if you have access to counseling in your community, I implore you, I highly recommend that you talk with a trusted licensed professional. And while I am a mental health counselor, this is entirely different from therapy. This is an educational video. In therapy, you will be talking with a counselor more in depth about your concerns. You don't typically hear about your counselor's belief system or perspectives or about their life, their experiences, unless you ask the counselor. And even with that, you're probably going to get very minimal of your counselor, because we have boundaries, we have professional boundaries, and it's really about your mental health and your goals. Okay, so I also want to add that disclaimer, and I mentioned this before, we are speaking about this from a theological perspective, meaning we're going to be talking about higher power, we're going to be talking about God, we're going to be talking about Christianity. And I know not everyone is Christian, and your belief system is your belief system. I'm the same person that I am in the counseling room, okay? So I don't force my belief system on anyone else. I approach people with respect, and I ask for the same respect. So that looks like us not engaging in frivolous debate in the comment section. I'm not forcing this on anyone. Do not stay somewhere that you are feeling uncomfortable. Okay, so because the mental health side of boundaries is so loaded, I have a lot of information to share. I don't want to overwhelm my audience, so I'm going to break this into a series. The part 1 of the series is going to talk more about the mental health perspective. The second part of the installment is going to have a deep dive into the scriptures. So that is the part where I recommend that you follow along with your Bible. Whether it is an app or whether it's your physical Bible, it really doesn't matter about the translation. This is particularly for those who are wanting to learn their Bible more, are new to the faith, and it's just really helpful for you to be able to follow along and see it for yourself, rather than someone simply telling you what the scripture says. That builds up memory, builds up confidence in what is actually being presented, okay? Okay, so let's jump in. Let's talk about what is a boundary. A boundary is the limit that we set with ourselves and other people. So boundaries can protect our morals, our personal convictions, ultimately what is important to us. Some boundaries can be explicit, which is when you're openly stating your limits with people. This is more like you saying, no, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not okay with that. Please don't do that. Please don't touch me there. While other boundaries can be more implicit, which in this case is when there are unspoken limits. Example of an implicit boundary can be when you have shoes or shoe rack at the door, and people who are guests, they come into your house and they take off their shoes. Sometimes you don't have to say that, and people just catch on. They just know to take off their shoes. And then other times people don't know what that means and you have to tell them. So assuming others are just supposed to know your unspoken rules and just have common sense. I'm quoting common sense because common sense is not what everybody thinks it is. Having that mindset tends to lead to disappointment and resentment towards others. So let's say you have a friend who is from a different country, totally different background, different culture. They're visiting your house for the first time. Maybe you have a shoe rack at the door. Maybe your other friends have caught on without you having to say anything. But your new friend comes into your house for the first time and they still have their shoes on. Now, if you were to blow up at that friend and say, common sense should have told you to move your shoes, that's just so disrespectful. Like, who walks around in shoes in somebody's house? Like, who does that? Expecting people to automatically just know your customs and your rules is going to lead you into disappointment. That's not healthy. So, signs that you need healthy boundaries. You're feeling chronically overwhelmed. You have feelings of resentment towards people asking for your help. You tend to avoid calls and interactions with others who might ask you for something. You're feeling really burnt out. You don't really have free time. Boundaries are not manipulating people into changing their behavior. You can still be a kind person and set limits with others. I know this one is a big one, especially for those who are coming from people-pleasing tendencies. So you are not responsible of how others respond to your boundaries. The next part is common ways people can respond when you are setting a boundary. In some instances, people can push back. They can test your limits and see if you're willing to say yes to certain things, and then they can knock down that whole boundary like the walls of Jericho, because you gave a bunch of micro yeses because people are testing your limits until the whole boundary just collapses. Some people will just ignore your boundary. Now, this is particularly common if you have stated this boundary before, but the people around you have learned that there are no consequences to violating your boundary. So if you are stating, I'm not okay with this, maybe they'll see a little attitude here and there, but you just keep giving them the same benefits and not changing your behavior. This just seems like what you're saying is words without action. And I'm not saying that people should go around just violating your boundaries, but what are you demonstrating about yourself and your standard? If you are not honoring your own boundary and you are allowing people to keep reaping the benefit of you and your presence, and you're showing up the same way and you're not changing anything or giving consequences, what are you teaching the other person about how to treat you? How are you treating yourself? So another way people can respond to your boundary is rationalizing their own behavior and also questioning you. For example, maybe you have a family member in an older generation. Well, this is just how we talked back in my day. Y'all too sensitive. After you said, hey, I don't like you commenting on my weight. That's part of rationalization. And some people just will question you, like, well, why does that offend you? Why this? Why that? Some people get flat out defensive to your boundary and take it as an insult. And going back to an older generation, this is a new concept for them. Maybe their parents violated their boundaries and this is just the norm. You're going to get that. You're going to get people like that. And it doesn't make them evil, but at the same time, you don't have to take that. Another way people can respond to your boundaries is ghosting. Now, for those who don't know what this term means, it's a disappearing act. Now, the next one is silent treatment. Similar to ghosting, but this can even play out in the same household and y'all can be looking at each other. One parent in the household set a boundary with another parent. Receiving parent who got that boundary set on them did not like that, and in response, they completely stop speaking, even though they are living in the same house. Psychologists, therapists, we've seen this before. People can even include their kids in on this. But one is communicating through the child as like the middleman to speak to the other parent. Tell your mom I said this. The mom is sitting in the room. So this is an example of silent treatment. Another way people can respond to your boundary is through acceptance. Before it gets to acceptance, these other possibilities can act as a deterrent that keeps people from setting a boundary with another person. I just want to be liked. I just want to be accepted. I don't want to be in conflict. I don't want people mad at me. So I'm not going to say anything. Okay. So one hard pill to swallow is we cannot change others. Sometimes others will not understand your point of view or accept you. This is really tough, especially for those who are conditioned to people please. You can soften your tone. You can read all the communication books in the world. You can go to therapy. You can learn all the emotional intelligent verbiage out there to explain yourself to the other person and why what you're saying is healthy. But if they are set in their ways and they are committed to staying within their comfort zone, you have to make that decision on whether you're going to accept them as they are or decide to let them go or modify this relationship, okay? Because somebody is going to have to compromise, and if this person is not backing down, you're going to have to be the one to back down. And is that worth it for you? That's not something I can answer for you or anyone really else can answer for you. It's what are you willing to accept? Types of boundaries. So we have physical boundaries, the physical proximity. Some people are huggers, some people are not huggers. Some people don't like being touched. Emotional boundaries. You can have some coworkers who are okay with talking about their breakup at work and talking about the emotions that they're feeling, while another coworker can be going through a breakup themselves and keeping tight-lipped, not saying anything to their coworkers. This is an example of different emotional boundaries. Intellectual boundary. This can be people's political beliefs, spiritual beliefs, values. Material boundaries. Well, these are possessions. Some people are okay with their friend borrowing their car. Some people are totally against that. Some people are okay with lending their friend money. Some people are against that. Time boundaries. This can be the time limits that you set with hanging out with certain individuals. Boundary styles. So we got porous boundaries, healthy boundaries, rigid boundaries. So signs that you have a porous boundary style. You let almost anyone get close to you. You're overly trusting of others, even complete strangers. You overshare personal information. You're overly involved in others' problems. You avoid conflict by giving in to others. You do not assert your personal values. You communicate passively. Healthy signs of a healthy boundary style. You're selective about whom to let in and who to keep out. You understand that it takes time to build trust with others. You share personal information appropriately. You're able to say no when needed. You support others without being too involved. You stand by your personal values, but you can adapt when needed. You communicate assertively. Signs of a rigid boundary style. You keep most people at a distance. You're very untrusting of others. You're very guarded with your personal information. You say no to others most of the time. You tend to ignore others' opinions. You avoid conflict by pushing others away. You have an inflexible personal value set. You communicate aggressively. So how can one get to that space of setting healthy boundaries? Well, one, we need to have a very stable identity. Just think about it. So if you do not know who you are, how is it possible for you to advocate for what you need? If you don't know your dislikes, you're not sure of what you like, you're not sure of what you stand for, it's very easy to be swayed and allow others to give you a false identity. When you do not have a stable concept of your worth, your value, what you bring to the table, your purpose, it's so easy to want to be doing what everybody else does.